team for showing up also. We are just having quite the time the last couple of weeks. The Honolulu 1 and 2 have changed everything temporarily. And part of it I was away for. And so Deb was leading the charge, but the city is kind of at an all hands on deck. And especially for an organization like OER that is attached to the mayor's office, most of our positions are not connected, to federal funding. So they're required to only work on CDBG or anything else. So we do have that flexibility in times of emergency or in times of economic issues to be flexible, right? And so all of the teams here has been out at the Community Assistance Center at some point in time in Waialua. I'll let Deb talk about more of it, but I just want to say mahalo to all of them and let you know how hard this team works, how much they care about community. Maka Hassan Fisher is there every single day and his house is gone in Waialua. He is on our community equity team. Bridget DeMello, who is one of our resource connectors for the business team, also had her house flooded, walked out with the water up to her knees. And so she's been recovering a little bit at her home to take care of things, but they're back here and they're supporting others. And so I know all of you are doing the same in your own way. And but just sincere appreciation. That's what we're here for. This is a part of our DNA. And yet, there's all sorts of other stuff still going on. So we want to update you on that. So slide 1. Thanks, Shar. So right now, we are in the midst of budget season with the city council. And Eliza is going to chat with you a little bit more about that. Our executive members, chair and vice chair, spend probably a little more time with us than they'd like to, but they know all the ins and outs of what's going on with the OER budget. This is a slim year for the city, whereas last year was a $5.3 billion request from the mayor. This year it's a $5.1 billion request, primarily where the mayor is trimming, although it's strategic across the board. It is for salaries for staff that are not yet in place. They're not cutting salaries of live bodies, but salaries for positions that are to be filled. So what Deb and I have found interesting is when we've been to various meetings out in the community, one recently with the chamber and Carl Bonham at UHERO, their forecast for the state of Hawaii, I'm sure you're paying attention to this, Tony, too. Hawaii moves beyond recession, but more slowly than many folks on the continent. But our recovery from this downturn is important. And to do so, as I mean, if I could quote the words exactly, but Dr. Bonham basically said, now is the time for government to invest in economic development and not like divest from any kind of government or economic development support. And he couldn't be more, forthright and clear about that. I feel like have him come and speak to the city council. But you all have been so supportive of that, and we continue to make our case. And in these tight economic times, we understand all the machinations going back and forth with the administration and the city council. So we appreciate your support. We have a fairly small budget. It's primarily salaries. Our funding right now for programs is around 3.1 million overall. So it, for the staff funding that we have, we more than surpass the amount of dollars that we're bringing in, either federal or private funds to support our programs. And that's what we want to show, that our team is a value to the city because we're adding revenue to the city's coffers, which in this case is not paying for our staff, is not paying for our operations. It goes directly to individuals, businesses, farmers, and communities. So that's our goal here.
where among like the city's different revenue streams, where's the projected loss of revenue?
The main issue is that property tax is flat.
Yeah.
And so that is what we're dealing with. Kalani and others, although this isn't his thing anymore, could probably speak more to visitor revenue, because now we have the Oahu TAT, but that is also looking to be flat in terms of revenue. But you know, where we rely on property taxes is much more heavily than other sources. So
Amy, a quick question on the budget. And it's common that there's a budget and then maybe there's unfilled positions, so you don't actually hit the budget. So this is the budget cut, right, year over year. And I guess my question is, is
yes,
it in that kind of cushion area where did we actually spend that amount, or did we
we
spend
are
less than
actually,
that? on this
yeah.
year?
So we go back and forth basically after the budget passes and the new year fiscal year begins July 1. We start the process for the new year in August. So we send our initial budget to the Budget and Fiscal Services Office, and we go back and forth and negotiate. So this represents basically losing a position in OER.
So it's a hard dollar. We actually spent the money
We will spend
and we can't spend
almost
the money
every
next year.
penny
Got
of
it.
the dollars that.
That was my question, figure out how severe, if we were 5% under budget and they cut it a few percent, then it's not this harsh.
This office wouldn't be.
The one,
It's a straight cut.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Got it.
Anything you want to add to
No,
that?
it was the one vacant position that we
That they cut that?
had.
How's the trimming affect OER directly? Is there like positions that you guys had that were vacant that are could be cut?
Just that one.
One.
And so for us, it is our data strategist. And the perfect example was yesterday, Haidima asked Alyssa to provide them the number of businesses impacted by the storm. The initial assessment starts with the number of businesses in the impacted areas, which our data specialist was able to prepare. But we need to have this, for us, we need to have this information at our fingertips. But instead it resides in the CCA and DVET, which is okay. We can work with them and we continue to do that. I talked to Jimmy Tokioka, we coordinated, but really, we'll be okay with that cut. We have added back in some funding that was, it's represented in there for our community equity team. So these won't be the final numbers. But there's a lot of politics going back and forth, so what you can count on is every penny of that small operations budget that we receive, and this represents OER and the Honolulu Film Office, so that's 3 people and their operating budget. So our operations are actually 460, something like that, thousand. We are a very lean machine. The mayor's office in culture and arts is 7 people, and they have a $6 million operational budget. So I think you get the bang for the buck when you take care of OER staff and keep our computers operating. All right. So these are the 3 things that we identified that were identified by the commission for OER priorities. Advocate for the preference of local business procurement, launch and complete both a new small bets pilot and Idea to Biz 2.0, and continue to advocate for Chapter 30. Next slide. So small bets fund development. This is a new one. Our community equity team is taking the lead, reaching out with and working with other community-based organizations to see, because we've, as we've learned from, I'm losing the name of the organization out in the community.
Is it Wesley?
No, no, the folks that,
Better block.
yes, Better Block, that do this.
That's a very.
Where'd she go? Where'd she go? Bye-bye. Bye-bye. We share it with you.
Yeah.
Fine.
Whether we've talked to Better Block or our Complete Streets team or others that do this kind of community visioning and then funding projects that they come up with, we've learned a lot from them. We hope to not repeat the mistakes, but one of the main things is work with community-based organizations who already kind of have like where we're going with stuff. Because what we want to do is make sure that community feels like they're heard and a part of this experiment with small bets and seen through economic development from the grassroots level. So working with Kokua Kalihi Valley, started out with Susanna Wesley. I think there's a partnership there and longstanding relationships that will get a first small bets pilot done before the start of this fiscal year. So we'll keep you informed on that. Next slide.
Wait, sorry, on the KKV, is that gonna be a similar structure too? You're talking to David and Steve about that?
Yeah. We have, I mean, it's KKV and Pobura now. So Cooney, David, Michael,
Nice.
Jesse. Yeah. We have a current contract with Jesse at KKV for markets and food distribution at rail stations and related to stations of abundance. So we have ongoing work with them on that as well as with our community outreach. And previous work with our ag team. So, Deb, why don't you do a quick update here?
Yes, since Greg is not here. So this is the local preference and procurement legislative bill at the state legislature that's a priority for this commission. So there is a pig, but Greg is not here today to report. The bill is moving along. So the House version of the bill is dead. The Senate version is the vehicle. They've been still making some changes. It is still alive at this point in session, which is actually phenomenal in my opinion for a first year. We said we want to float the idea and see how far we can get it. It's been very well supported. A lot of conversations and negotiations with the Attorney General's office and state procurement. I'm more on the, we've had no opposition for the why this is a good thing, more on operationalizing how it will work with procurement. And so we've been in a number of those conversations. Greg and I have met with a lot of lawmakers along with the city's lead lobbyist. It has finance committee is the next, which is often where things end their journey. And there are different versions. So regardless, this bill, as it continues past finance, it would still need to go into conference. So it is not done yet, but it's made it really far in the process and has some great conversations. So I think even if it doesn't go through this year, we would come back with a stronger proposal for next year to start the conversation.
Good job. Commissioner.
Moving along.
Next slide. Idea to biz. Want to add Alyssa? She's the program lead, so why not? You're here.
So graduates are still kind of trucking along. I don't know if you saw the State of the City, Selena, the Leather and Lay company was featured in that State of the City address. So they're still just moving along. Our team kind of as expected. They're still reaching out every month to see how they're doing. They're a little less responsive, I think, they're busy and other things, but still seem to be doing good. And then working on soliciting sponsorship for the second iteration. So we've had a couple bank meetings scheduled so far. Requests to all of the local SBA lenders went out a couple weeks ago. So got a couple scheduled and yeah, TBD. So still planning to work with Key Project, but they're also just a little busy at the moment with flow stuff.
So the good news on the solicitations to SBA lending financial institutions is I think almost all of them have responded. It's just a matter of setting up meetings and trying to figure out like what we're trying to do this year. Is there something that matches your goals? So hopeful that we can get some matching private funds for Idea to Biz 2 this year. And I think Alyssa has mentioned in the past, we're looking at a Windward cohort this year. Our site is likely to be Key Project, right in the community, a place where many are used to gathering. And if not, we'll be excited to connect them with folks at Key Project. Okay.
Do you need commissioner support for any of those meetings? Or
I mean, I think that would be great. This be honest, like my first time really doing this, so, we're also using a different city mechanism, chapter 63, to be able to go after that, money without all of the procurement process, so I guess I would defer to Amy and Deb.
One thing we could do, Alyssa, is send the list of meetings set up to commission members. So if you have a connection with that financial institution, we'd love either, letting them know how supportive you are, what a priority this is of yours, or potentially joining the meeting.
This is with the CRA groups or?
We worked with the SBA to identify all those who are already doing small business loans and lending, because we thought there was an aligned interest there.
I guess it's the lending groups.
It just
That's who I would make it, because that's the guys who are gonna make the magic happen.
It's a mixture, depends on the bank, like Brian would, we can contact directly. For example,
All of the above.
yes, all of the above. Okay. Alyssa, you have something? This is just so relevant, right now.
Yeah.
But
So stay open Oahu. So yesterday we did the STP for our local consultant, so hoping we can start work with them as early as next week. And really start getting some of those resources for businesses going. But in the meanwhile, with everything going on, and put it on the slide, just with updating Honolulu, with everything going on there. Looking to do support businesses who might have had damage, either direct structural damage due to floodwaters, or even like the secondary or tertiary impact of employees who aren't able to go, or to work, or businesses like Haleiwa where folks just aren't coming up that way. So looking to also incorporate that data too with the building stay open Oahu, but also trying to aggregate right now like immediate resources that are available for businesses in the immediate recovery space. Our initial information was that there wasn't much out there. We're seeing that now in real life. So I think it's timely to be able to figure all of that out and then also kind of keep that top of mind of businesses to be prepared for disaster resilience.
so with regard to that, Alex and Ramos, our Sustainable Ag and Food Systems Program Manager, and I were just over at the Managing Director's briefing to the City Council on flood relief, what has cost the city to date in terms of operations and facilities that have been destroyed. And the estimate right now is between 50 and 100 million. That can come from what I think is a $200 million rainy day fund that the city has. I may have that number wrong, but the city council is awaiting more refined reports as the city continues to collect information. So we're doing the same. Soon our business survey will go out to Oahu businesses so we can have a better idea of actual damages. It will follow the report to FEMA on the number of businesses that could be impacted in the areas. Alyssa's team is working on that, but I think it makes the case what she has been doing here, her foresight in putting this together, so we can make sure that businesses, even farmers, of the 126 farmers on this island that have responded with some kind of damage assessment, 110 of those are no insurance. So we want to make sure our businesses are not in the same boat, but we don't even have any data on that yet. So Alyssa's team will be reaching out, but what this program intends to do is to build those relationships, to build their capacity to be disaster ready, to have the insurance, to have the pictures taken of their inventory, to have a system so their employees can come to work if possible during another disaster event. But this again is, just emphasizes what we're trying to develop here at the city level. It's not really something in terms of boots on the ground that our state does, that DBET does, that BCCA does. And so I think we're going to have a learning experience as we work with our businesses on this latest disaster.
But comment on that though, can they put insurance? That's the other problem. So many insurance companies are just not going to insure in the state.
Yeah.
And so what do? I mean, this is along homeowners, it's everyone. And especially farmers, especially land. Like State Farm, I think, was one of the ones that would insure for farmers. And sometimes depending on the whatever, they're just saying no. So what do farmers do? You know what I mean? And so I think that's something that the city and the state needs to really look at. Of the reality of things, you know, all these guys, I mean, even for businesses and restaurants, there's firemen's fund just left the islands. That used to be a big one to insure for restaurants. And then they're like, oh, too risky,
Yeah.
we're out. And that was years ago, so
So
it's
this-
not just this.
This is something I think the state ledge and the insurance commissioner and others have been attempting to address, but I do think just like local procurement, this is something that the commission and OER could weigh in on. We could look at in terms of legislation in the future. I think that when our fellow staff member here at OER, Constancio Paranol, eventually gets his Institute for Justice
Regulatory justice.
regulatory justice project complete. He's in a cohort with 6 other cities. I've talked to Eliza Olin a little bit about this, but what it does is detail the process for a business idea to when a business can get started up. And there's 48 to 64 steps for a restaurant or someone who wants to open a storefront. Very few of those steps are actually in the city where we have our hands on the wheels, but definitely DPP, stormwater, some other things do play a delaying role sometimes. So we want to share that with you guys. It may be a vehicle to take it not only to the Small Business Regulatory Review Board, but to the state ledge in terms of your vision for how this should work or your ideas for potential solutions. And I think the process in terms of getting insurance or what insurance may or may not be available based on the assessments that insurance companies make, whether they're gonna do business with us, could be a part of something this group could work on. Just a thought. Okay, moving on.
Is there anything that OER could help with or that the city's already doing on the communication side to direct business traffic appropriately? So like, people shouldn't be going over here, but go over here, like these businesses still go to that kind of,
Right now during the flood.
yeah.
So that's what I just proposed we could put out in the mayor's next press release. I don't know if you noticed, he's doing about 3 a day or more in terms of updates on flood recovery efforts. But when the survey that Alyssa created goes live for businesses, I thought it would be a good time to remind folks because we understand through the visitor industry associations that concierges and others have been encouraging visitors earlier not to visit. And yes, some businesses weren't open because their staff couldn't come into work and were dealing with their own disasters, but many of like Polynesia town businesses are unharmed. And so we would like to support them. We would like to encourage people to visit, but starting with our assessment and the team getting out on the street, that'll be another way to make sure we have the most recent information, and we will use the mayor's pulpit to push that message out.
No,
Just
that-
announced
as
that.
it's evolving, I think that's trying to sort of pivot on the messaging.
Is the, after the Lahaina wildfires, the FBI had tons of options for businesses. Is that the case now?
We do not have a disaster declaration yet. The initial first phase was sent in yesterday. We have our fingers crossed that the current administration will see favorably to support. Because a lot of what's already been encouraged by the city is in the hopes that there is some federal reimbursement coming to cover those costs. But that said, that is the trigger to also activate SBA, USDA, HUD, their CDBG, disaster assistance, etc. So
That's a federal government determination.
that is federal. So that agency that manages FEMA is currently unfunded also. So
So when, let's just, when that is triggered, that would be something that you guys would help people connect with. Okay, because I remember there were like resources like how to getting funding to make your business resilient for storms, wildfires, all those types of things. And so really great resources if and when we go.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I mean, I think the SBA can help with more loans. I think our business disaster resiliency program will pair well with that. And Alyssa, the whole team has a great relationship with the SBA here. They're all folks who've been around.
This is Melanie, sorry. So is the SBA the only place we're sending folks for possible loans right now? That are non-traditional?
So I mean, in general, the SBA isn't doing any disaster loans just because the state of emergency hasn't been declared. There are little pockets of fundraising and whatnot, but there isn't really a lot of clear mechanisms for like how that's getting out to businesses. So like through the various chambers and things like that. But there's no, from what we've seen so far in our ask dealers, that there isn't really anything right now for small business relief in terms of like funding, tax reimbursement, any of that related to any storm damage.
I had heard the Chamber of Commerce was cutting checks already. That Sherry's group was that Sean Quinlan or Rep Quinlan called me this morning and let me know that. Is that not?
I know they're sending out information and we're planning to send out a link for how folks can donate. And we're trying to get money out to businesses, but I don't know if it's gone live yet, any of that. But clear.
Okay, thanks.
So they're a part of the HIEMA regular updates Alyssa has been a part of in terms of business disaster assistance. So we can keep you guys informed about that, but that is still a moving target. And we're definitely trying to stay in touch with the universe that especially the Oahu Business Connector has brought us closer to. On another note on that, we are working with the state presently with the Office of Federal Awards Management, which is under Budget and Finance, as well as Seth Colby, with the governor's directive that there is $5 million they're going to make available for business disaster recovery. And so it looks like 4 million of that may go to OER to do a program. Our issue will be standing that up as quickly as we possibly can to get business disaster relief out. It would be anywhere from $5,000 to maybe $50,000 or $30,000 per business. Of course, they would have to be have to show some kind of damage from the recent floods. But we're working on that right now. I'm happy that the state sees us as a good partner in working with local businesses. And so we'll be even in closer touch with Chamber, North Shore. Our last business recovery program, the Chamber ran it for us. So more to come. Okay. How about George, since you're here, you want to talk about these two real quick?
Sure. So there's two main focuses. One is on a small business loan fund and the other one is on the economic. So how do you revitalize empty spaces? So two updates. Today, we finally got the signature on all the paperwork necessary to launch the small business loan fund. So we're working with Feed the Hunger, Patty Chang, and we are, I mean, literally like an hour ago we got it. So that means that we can move forward with the $35,000 that we're giving to them to use $250,000 as their funds to give to small businesses. And the loan amount is going to be on the micro side, so that's between $5,000 to $25,000. And there's a target of kind of the businesses that just can't afford or can't get into the regular bank loans, even if they're SBA backed. I personally experienced that. Don't have 2 years of historical revenues when running the hub, but banks were willing to give us money, but not willing to loan us money. So we're trying to bridge that gap so we can get build credibility in their credit scores. And so the next phase is to essentially work with our partners, our program partners out in the community, and hey, this is available. Let's activate it. The next one is how do we revitalize empty spaces? I've had the opportunity to look at a couple of spaces in Chinatown. There's been a lot of support from Council Member Tyler DeSantos Tam. He really wants to activate Chinatown. And we looked at maybe 10 different spaces, and one ended up kind of popping. And what I mean by popping is we walked in and I was like, this is big enough where I think we could have impact. No matter what kind of business model you want, you kind of need a little bit of space for there to be activation of economic development. And I was like, this could be a reach, but it's about 3,500 square feet. And then I was like, is there anything upstairs? And this is on the corner of River Street and Nimitz. So there's a lot of like traffic there. There's a lot of potential there because there's the rail station that's going to be in 5 years going to be built. And we look upstairs and there's this beautiful space that is completely run down and has probably 40 years worth of city documents and boxes and old models. And I immediately was like, this is unbelievable. It hasn't been run, it hasn't been occupied or activated in 20 years. And it's got beautiful bones. And downstairs is a little less as glamorous, but it could be coupled for different types of business models. So I immediately started calling my network to see if they want to come in. And so it needs to be a 501c3. So Mahina's coming in to take a look at it. NOM is coming in to take a look at it, and we're going to see like what other business models could use the space. I could keep on going, but Amy's not me to wrap it up.
Yeah. Keone.
No, what is the good bones you're talking about?
Got character, rarely identified and found in Honolulu.
Hey now.
It's
You're on a short leash.
I mean, I've looked at a lot of spaces in Honolulu, all over the island, and it's rare to find really interesting spaces that feel like it's been there for a long time. It's got beautiful bay windows.
Like a block away from the skate shop, right?
Yes,
Okay.
right there by the, you can see the ocean.
See the ocean. You may not be able to see the ocean once the rail goes in, but it's
Yeah.
it's your rail. I mean, yeah.
So, this is something we've all been talking about for a long time. George is proceeding, whether we get amendments to chapter 38 or not, that's a whole other political and side story, which Olin and Eliza engaged in with their commission report to the city council. But I'm excited we're making progress. This is right in line also with the mayor's vision for revitalizing Chinatown. I'm sure Tony and others who spend time down there would love to see it, and also goes along with our potential move of our office to Chinatown. So thanks, George, for all your work on that. And just to wrap things up, this is, funding and where we're doing our work today. We still have a number of grants pending. I think we mentioned last time we got a earmark for 400,000 that is in Alyssa's bailiwick. Finally, these were recent grant applications we submitted. And I think that's it.
I'm not thinking.
Yep. You got a question? Yeah, well,
I just want to add one other storm, really. I thought we covered a lot with the Honolulu piece. So this OER has been playing a real leadership role the last couple of weeks. with the small business sector, the agriculture sector, and so like on the ground, talking to folks what's needed, and I think then in the process to get out short-term and then longer-term relief, recovery, build, so we have deep roots in those sectors. And then newer for this office, but it's become apparent how needed it is the language access team. So our community equity liaisons have been literally working, I think 24/7, doing, some of them doing direct interpretation, but also we are now doing the language translation and interpretation when it became apparent that other parts of the city do not have the same capacity or connections in that area. So we are now like translating things for Department of Emergency Management, because we saw what often happens if you have limited English proficiency, folks were not getting any information or incorrect information. So both for families, but I think that will also be we've already found it's very important for the farmers and for many of our very small businesses the English is not necessarily their first language. So I personally, we had, I don't know, over 100 folks from the Lao community, most of whom were agriculture workers and farmers on Sunday. So how are we making sure and that they get information about what's happening and also can tap into those economic opportunities when they are available? Because then those are the communities that won't get the information to get the SBA funds, the FEMA funds when they become available. So I think our team is really strategizing on how to make sure that our limited English proficient community has equal access to that economic benefits. We know coming. So.
Just a really quick comment. So how is the city, or are we using any kind of AI? I know we talked about AI, but it sounds like there's so much information that we're needing. We're low on resources, but is there a way to utilize like the DCCA data? And then I know you can cut a job, but how can we use AI with utilizing all the information that's there so it's not redundant? And especially now, since you need raw information and all this information is coming out because people are coming out of woodworks that we maybe we didn't have data on. How is that being utilized, or has that been considered, or is there a program that the city uses that they have a contract with AI? I'm just curious.
No, we use it internally, I would say, so.
Are you allowed to use it?
Of course,
Okay.
yeah,
I wouldn't say of course, there's a lot of
No,
private
some
businesses
places are
that are
not.
still.
Yeah, are not saying no, we are.
yeah. Well, I mean, for a couple of years already, we're trying to settle on a tool or a couple in terms of paid subscriptions. Everyone has some input in that. But we're using it every day. Just today, the mayor asked for an assessment of the agricultural damage. So we know from the data that we can pull from the USDA Ag Survey, there's 1,002 farms on this island. And then we look at what the Agriculture Stewardship Hawaii Foundation received from the community thus far. We spoke with our partners, Hunter Evelyn, Amanda Shaw, and others who are a part of this effort to get on the ground assessment. But so we kind of know from them that none of the farmers in the Mokuleia area have responded to the survey because they didn't have any power. So there's no way that they would be in this information. So I don't know if you want to add anything, County, but what we're trying to do is put together what the city doesn't want to do is duplicate other assistance that could be forthcoming from either the state or the feds. The state has put out a program that provides $1,500 per farmer. Originally, the applications were due on Friday. Now they've extended that, but there's 1,800 applications, and I believe 300 that are able to be funded from the 500,000 they have available. So we're trying to put something together to see if this may be an area where the city can step in. We need to follow USDA, what a true ag disaster criteria is. And we'll see if this might be something that the city council will include in the utilization of the city's rainy day fund. But a lot of that work has to be done on the ground with farmers putting it in. Once we get the information, then we can AI it to death to create the program, to create the slides and the PowerPoint presentation. That's kind of where we are with the use of AI, but we don't have access to the DCCA database. They won't share it, they don't share it. We've only asked for 6 years. But
And on language access, I would say our team has found it's a mixed bag at this point in time. It seems that the ChatGPT, Google Translate, some languages, it's great, and we have utilized it, and then we were told very specifically that like Thai and Lao, it's complete gibberish when it's spitting out. I mean, I think it will evolve, but in this present time, we're like, it's nonsense apparently. What we had actual speakers that this is, this is nothing. So I think it's an evolving tool, but if you have, I think there's either ideas of how it can be used, because I think getting that information out into the community is.
I think that what we discussed before, all the storms and how we were gonna work on 2026, it kind of, what an opportunity to implement it, you know, like, you know, in real time kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's what I was gonna say, I think second half of this year, we were dedicating to how can AI help the city be more effective. Okay. Did you want to do anything else on flood?
Nope, I think we covered it.
All right, it says here that I have a call to action. Just really quick, if you if you're not able to watch the budget briefing yesterday, Amy and her team kind of had a challenging situation with the council. And there was a story in that budget this morning as well. And so all of that to say that I personally am going to do whatever I can to support Amy and her team. I've started setting up meetings already with council members that I know, so that I can talk to them and kind of understand their concerns and figure out where we can help. If you all are so inclined, you have relationships, I encourage you to do that. If there's any time to advocate for this office and all the good work that they do, it is now. So please, please make that a priority in the next couple weeks, please. Time is of the essence. And then,
Sorry, could you explain that in a little more detail? Like, what is the concerns? Why is time of the essence? How should we reach out to people like this region?
yeah, so, I mean, Amy can talk more about the budget part in detail. I don't want to overshadow her, but the truth is that the council, I think the council doesn't understand how critical this office is. And just like you were saying, it's very apropos that this office is the only one that can be nimble in times of crisis, right? We've been saying that, but I think that we can probably emphasize that going forward. And I think that's one of the messages that I'm going to have for council. So if you want to do anything, you want to help support, reach out to the council members. I think we can give you, Amy's team can give you kind of the names of which ones were need the most maybe discussion time with us. But I think it's really conveying the good work that it is happening here, how much the commission is involved, the results that we can show. And also, you know, like one of the things Steph didn't say, but a lot of the departments have civil service employees. And because of that, they can't be deployed in a crisis situation, but OER supplies can. And so that's a huge thing. Also, we bring in a ton of the grant funding, right? And so I think these are things that we really need to share and emphasize to the council. And so if you need their contact info, if you want to know who they are, I think Amy, you can, start talking about, I can share that with you guys over email, but I just would encourage you all to really please help and step up and help Amy get through this. She's doing great though. Doing great.
Where's the gap? Like, I mean, you guys have done, in my opinion, a very great job communicating all the work that you guys do to us. Like, how is that not being communicated to the council, and how are they missing what we see?
Or they're just trying to balance the
Yeah,
budget and take everyone down by 5%.
Yeah, it's priority.
I mean, I probably am like you in your own work, in your own lives. There's always room for improvement. Could I spend more time working with the council members? Can Deb also? Yes. And we will continue to strive to do that. You know, we've kind of reorganized, especially with Deb here, to give me hopefully more time to pull away from the day-to-day work and to engage with our stakeholders out in the community, but the primary ones being our city council members. So I will continue to do that. We do invite them to everything we do. We provide them a monthly update of everything we do. They also receive our weekly newsletter. But you know, there's just everyone has a different perception, and honestly, the city is huge. You know, there's 10,000 employees, and if I'm Matt Wire or anyone else, you know, he hasn't even been to the council chambers recently. He's been in his community every single day, the assistance center, the farmers, the businesses. So things like that come up, and we try to be there and work with them on projects that are important to them in their district, and continue to do that. But
I'll add my 2 cents, we can move on. I think this office is still very new. This work is new. I think this is why the work we're doing with Josh is so critical, so that we can all use some of the same messaging and talking points about what it is. Because the work we do here is not as tangible as like the fire department, right? The police. It's very easy for them to understand Board of Water Supply. And this work's a little bit more many things, and not to say intangible, but right, the work we're doing. So I think if the commission is able to help communicate just the essential nature of it, if we're going to help in times of crisis, in stimulating the economy and being forward looking at the future of this island. Again, it's just not as crisp as like firefighters. And you can say that. And that's why actually we brought Josh in to help with that. Like, how do we explain this mix of work that we do that is really critical and not something you can necessarily hold in that same way? Yeah. So,
Yeah, no, I think this is a really fruitful conversation that's elevating a bunch of things. And it also kind of ties to some of the feedback that I shared with Josh on our strategic framework. No, I think there's kind of an identity crisis, and not intentional and not by anybody's fault. It's because it's something different, right? And the city doesn't have a traditional economic development arm. And so I think there's oftentimes it's easy to slip into thinking that OER is that, but we're not that. And we've been trying to articulate what it is. And it's not really intangibles to me. It's just like we're being evaluated currently, right? As something that I don't think we were designing it or it was intended to be, or never really claimed it wasn't. So doing the work with Josh in the strategic framework, I think is really important and critical at this time. And the example that you just gave about how OER staff are out there in community is really it's a proof point to me that and it's super relevant, right? Because being able to translate between communities and the city is a really important function, not just between the city departments, but also, we have a breakdown and a lack of trust between community and government institutions. I mean, it's just real, right? And where OER is, what I'm seeing it acting as is as this bridge between community systems and government systems, right? Especially under stress, given your example, Deb, right? And so what OER is, it's translating between systems that don't naturally or to traditionally connect with each other. And I think like when we talk about OER's role being like an integrator or a coordinator in the draft framework, right? I think that this is the example that you just gave is a really good one for us to uplift and really think about, right? Because it's not just program delivery, these community liaisons being out there, it's not just program delivery, right? it's actually helping different parts of our systems communicate and work together better, especially under stress. And that's really what resilience is, right? It's our ability to continue under stress, right? And so I think this is really fruitful to inform the conversation that we're going to have with the strategic framework, because if we're seeing the role differently through these examples and through our experience, and it's getting received differently and not the way that we intended by others who are important to our existence, then we need to really articulate it and build on it intentionally, especially how we measure and articulate success. But it's about the system functionality, especially under stress, like avoiding the stress, avoiding preparing for disaster, also in times. But that identity crisis between a traditional economic development agency versus what OER is, I think is exacerbating the misunderstanding.
Suggested, I'm not sure if it's helpful for a whole bunch of us to just call council members independently, different messaging. Like, I'm happy to talk to some of the council members who have relationships with, but I prefer to do it with somebody else that's on the ground.
The only way we're going to succeed in those conversations is having something strong to put in front of them. So the best use of our time right now is working on the strategic framework.
Sorry, Kearney, I haven't adjusted my microphone. Is this blasting your ears? I don't know what to do. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to speak softly because Kearney said my microphone's too loud. Yeah, I think it's important as I was reading through the framework, like we're having the role as a coordinator. I felt like if we can have some stronger measurable outcomes, because if those are clear indicators from city council around, are we doing what we say we're going to do? Are we executing programs? So I do think it's important, and I'm looking forward to the next conversation around the plan. And I think that will be really key as we have these conversations. I'm trying to speak softly.
But just to clarify, the budget is finalized in June, right? Yes, yeah, so that is and I'm not sure that we finish our strategic planning by June.
Perhaps by June, but it'll be
Yeah.
right before June,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
not in time.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of lay that out as a timeline, so everybody's kind of aware of.
A really quick question, like how different is this from last year? Because we did this last year again. They threatened to shut it all down. They don't not doing it. Is this similar or is it different?
Your last year, so.
Or is this an every year thing in government?
It's kind of been one of the every year things for us. I heard it was a little bit of the OED history that preceded us because of the connection with the mayor. I don't think there's that. I mean, I think we can utilize the strategic framework as a useful response from what we've developed thus far and share some of that to Olu's point. But when we get to messaging how we're gonna, our tactics and everything going forward, I hope that helps us in the big picture. But as Deb has, acknowledged from when she came here, it's hard to settle in people's minds. I know this too. Our team knows this too. What does OER do? And if I didn't work here every day, I would be asking. But you guys might see yourself.
I think it's like the definition of the word. What does it mean? Like the expectations, being like, we're gonna like revamp everything and everything's gonna be awesome. It's all gonna work. I think it's more of that kind of just economic revitalization stuff. That's what people are expecting. But it's all different in everybody's mind what that means.
Right,
So we're
and
not
so
moving.
economic development is like one of like. When you say fire department, everyone's like, got it. When you say economic development, I'm pretty sure if I asked Olin or Josh right now to describe what that is. They would be very different responses, and I think honestly, how you've helped us to define economic development going forward, or economic revitalization. Is forward looking. When I go to our national economic development conferences, we're on the cutting edge of what we're doing. And some of the thought leader articles that I just got today that actually are new from what Josh shared with you, really talk about quality of life, not necessarily business attraction, but quality of life as the precursor, the stage for economic development that economic developers need to focus on today because of the cost of housing, the cost of living, affordability is its primary concern, not just in Hawaii, but across the country. Economic development as an industry is shifting. And so I feel good about what we're doing when I look at what is the industry, where's the sector going? And so I thank you guys for keeping us on that track. And yet I know it's also rooted in the history of this place. That you're looking generations ahead, that our policies and our practices should reflect that we care about, the next 7 generations. And so that to me is a big piece, is looking back to understand what our future can be and hold for us. And you guys help us keep that centered too.
And then, sorry, one last thing, because we did go see the council, so I just, one comment from that is, that I didn't know this, they thanked us and said we were the only commissioners that actually showed up. Usually the reports are given by staff, and so for us to show up to advocate is probably really different. So, that really shocked us.
We gotta be the smallest department.
We are.
We gotta be on the list. I mean, it's a $5 billion budget, and I mean, for the city, and 2 million to us is. If we're like 0.5%. Just give us the money.
HPE is.
Maybe given that comment about showing up as we do our meetings and as we produce, maybe we can assign each of us, like if we do the messaging, maybe I'll go and show up with the next thing, but we have a coordinated effort. So we're saying the same thing and just producing the same thing and supporting each other as we go, but maybe that's what we're gonna need to do to show face, And like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I think we have to, I was telling you, I think as a commission, we have depended on Amy and her team to be the liaison with the council for the most part. And I think that in my mind makes the most sense, but I also think we need to take it upon ourselves to echo their message to the council and make sure that we're communicating that as well. And I think that they would like to see us more. Maybe we do a check-in with them at the beginning of the year, middle, end of the year, and we just kind of make sure we understand what their priorities are and ours are aligned with theirs. And Amy's got a million things to do, and so if we can help deliver those messages, I think that would be effective too. Yeah. So, I'm gonna skip the pig because you already talked about that. Yeah. Okay. So now we'll move on to Josh. Let's get our strategic plan discussion again, with all of this in mind. As well as the disaster response that needed and all that. So just kind of keep all that in your mind as we're doing this, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Eliza. And thanks all of you. That was the perfect segue into this. Not only the discussion today, but I think I'll just sort of reiterate really quickly what I was asked to help with. I think it really fits with what you all are saying, which is, this was never intended to be a strategic planning process where we think, where does ODR want to be in 5 years? Where do we want the city to be in 5 years? Where do we want the community to be in 5 years? And then let's come up with all the goals and objectives to get us there. It really is more of a framework. It's like a yes and it's to create a foundation of who is OER, what is it doing, why is it doing it, how does it do it, how is it measuring that and reporting that, and then I think there's a great opportunity following on that to do all kinds of planning, program development, and initiative development and response as well, because clearly part of the role of OER is not just developing programs and initiatives, it's coordinating, reacting, and integrating. So I've sensed a little bit of tension through the process, healthy tension, I think, and I'll use Greg Kim as an example because he told me to. It's not just that he's not here. He told me he wanted me to share his view, which is really that like he's so eager to do a long-term planning process and for the ERC to kind of do its own plan for the city and for economic revitalization. And I love that eagerness. And what I've been telling him is we're trying to sort of set the stage for all of that. There is a need. So when Amy and Deb first put the word out that they wanted someone to help with this, it was really like, we're doing all this great work. We have strategies, we know how we do it, but we also recognize that we need to be able to articulate that to everybody. We need others to understand the way we do what OER is. And so, sort of part one, create this framework. Part two, help with strategies for communicating that framework. And that's what's going to come, following on today's meeting or leading up to the next meeting, is that communications piece. But just wanted to kind of reiterate that because it does look a little different than it would if we were saying, like blank sheet of paper, what are our goals and strategies for economic revitalization for Oahu, for the next 5 to 10 years. I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation and ongoing. So we have limited time. We have a hard stop at 2. So I'm gonna scale this conversation accordingly. So I wanted to kind of note that I thought it was important for us to do some quick check-ins with the commissioners, just to kind of reflect on this moment we're in with the storm, the aftermath of the storms, and think about kind of what's most important to people in the face of a disaster like this, because clearly it relates so much to the work of OER. I'm not going to do that because I think we don't have time. And I feel like you've kind of already done it in the meeting so far, but I do think it is, of course, we wish there wasn't this pertinent example that we're all living in right now, but it is a great example, as so many of you have pointed out, of the importance of OER and its role and how it does its work. And so I think, I've already tried to integrate references to natural disaster into the framework. But as I've been listening to this conversation, I think it would be good to dial it up a little more because I think it's so front of mind for everybody. So apologies, I guess, that we're not going to go around and have quick check-ins. At our February 17th meeting, we focused primarily on the strategic goals, and they were very drafty, didn't have much time to put them together before that meeting. And we had some discussion, which was really great. And then following the February 17th meeting, I met with all the different program managers, which I loved, just because it was a chance for me to learn a lot more about the amazing work that OER is doing. And also got feedback from several of the commissioners that helped to flesh out that first part of the strategic framework. And then we drafted the performance measurement framework, which is kind of what I want to focus on most today. So in terms of the process and timeline, you all remember our discussion a month ago. Here we are in March, performance framework. Over the next month plus, we will be refining and coming to a kind of a near final draft of the framework. And then at the May meeting, we're hoping that the commission will review and kind of approve. And I put it in air quotes because I think this is going to be a living document that continues to evolve over time, but that will kind of culminate this process of building the framework now in May. And we'll have some communication strategy and communication materials that will accompany the framework. And that communications work may be ongoing even once the framework is approved. So I'm gonna spend a few minutes just walking through like what is in this draft, what comprises the framework. I'll explain sort of how the rationale for the way the performance measurement framework was built, and then the third piece of the draft, which is the program profiles and how they relate to the strategic goals and the performance measurement framework. And just a headline for every part of this discussion today, we're not going to have a lot of time for conversation, and so there's going to be a bunch of time afterwards for you to continue to get feedback in. So we don't need this. There's no pressure for today to be the only venue for giving feedback on the draft. I'm going to pause real quick. Any questions or thoughts so far? Okay. I hope that everybody had a chance to at least glance and skim through the current draft. We are kind of making edits live in the Google Doc, and so rather than looking at PDFs, I would encourage all of you to like go into the Google Doc, flag things, make comments, suggest edited language. So what's in the full draft currently? It has 3 parts. It's the goals and objectives, how we measure them, and then the programs that are actually doing the work. In the first part, sort of setting up the strategic goals, it felt really important to talk about the role of OER vis-a-vis the city, the role of the city vis-a-vis the state and the federal government, what we mean by revitalization. It's really like articulating the mission, vision, and approach of OER. These are all pieces that have existed in various forms, and we're really just trying to put it all together in a package that makes sense and that everybody feels comfortable with. And then that will, again, create this foundation and this framework for further work and planning. The strategic goals, there are 5, and these were goals that OER was already working on. So that obviously, these aren't new goals that we came up with in discussion. But the way I look at these goals is that they are meant to represent different parts of the system that need to function well for the economy to actually work for people. So these are high level strategic goals. Again, I just want to sort of underscore, not necessarily the goals that OER would come up with if you were doing a strategic planning process. Think of this more as a framework. They're the high level strategic goals that are perhaps always going to be the high level goals for OER, regardless of whether you come up with something that focuses in more granularly, for example, on innovation and future growth, focusing on AI. Like there may be pieces that become really that become strategic priorities, but they'll always probably fit under these high level goals. We tried to refine these in the last month and a half since the last meeting to just make sure that they feel distinct, and even though of course there's going to be overlap, that it's comprehensive and distinct enough to make sense. I'm not going to read through all of them, but these are the current 5 goals in the draft. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, everybody has the flip charts. Yeah, great question. Getting better at this as I figure out how you guys work. That's really the first part, are the strategic goals and the context. The second part, the performance measurement framework. So this flip chart over here with the arrows, the way we constructed this, and this has gone through some different iterations, because it's really, we're trying to figure out how to create a framework that would make most sense based on what is already being measured by each of the program areas and by OER overall, and putting it all together in a framework that will make sense both internally and externally. So really, we've got the goals, the 5 strategic goals. We've got the programs that are helping to implement the goals. Each of those programs, and of course, each of the programs has many sub-programs. So the program areas are producing outputs. The outputs are leading to outcomes, and then try to articulate the community level indicators that will show the changes created by the programs over time. And then to Keone's point, and his feedback has been really, really helpful as we think about this. It's not just about OER delivering programs that are creating outcomes and change. It's also the role that OER plays as an integrator and coordinator. And so the current draft includes some ideas of ways to measure that role as well. I think that's going to be a something that requires ongoing attention in terms of how to communicate that it's not just the programs, it's also the connecting and integrating that's happening throughout the ecosystem by the OER.
Water resistant carpet, man.
Yeah. It's just water, bro.
Interrupts everybody. Okay.
So we wanted the framework to not just be a list of programs. I was amusing myself with these quotes, which you don't have to pay that much attention to, like, you know, tactics without strategy is the noise before the beat, some said. It's not just metrics. I have no idea who Inez Garcia is, but I like that quote. Optimizing for figures without context leads to trouble. It's really intended to connect strategy, implementation, and measurement. Implementation, not in granular detail. This is not an action plan. This is trying to articulate the framework of what OER is, how it does its work, what it's trying to impact. So everybody always says that Winston Churchill said, however beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results. That is not Winston Churchill. Just FYI. And then lastly, and I actually think that this is really important based on the way I've been thinking of it and what I was hearing in the discussion earlier. I love this quote, when things don't go according to plan according to how things go. We're trying to really make sure this reflects first who OER is, how it does its work, what it's focusing on. And that if we can get really sound with that and help others to understand it, and I think it really will pave the way for a lot of ongoing planning and fruitful discussion, hopefully a lot less misunderstanding or lack of understanding of what OER and why. We try to create a consistent structure. I think that's part of, I think the utility of this framework. Externally for sure, but from talking to the program managers, I really think this will help internally to create kind of a uniform way of thinking about the programs and how it all fits together under the umbrella of OER. So having the goals and objectives, programs contributing to the goals, outputs, outcomes, and community indicators. That's see we replicated that structure in the performance measurement framework for all 5 of the strategic goals, and then in the language we used about how the programs are integrated into that. A couple more quick things before I just want to ask some framing questions, and we'll have some dialogue before we're done today. Again, to Keone's point and the great input he gave, in addition to measuring performance on the program areas, it's really important that we figure out how to measure the coordinating and integrating role of OER. There's not a single section on this, but in in the introduction to the performance measurement framework. We took a crack at that's on page 19 for what it's worth. You don't have to look at it now, but took a crack at some system level indicators that could get at this, more nebulous but important integrating role, things like cross-department collaboration, leveraged and aligned funding, partnership breadth and engagement, and access and barrier reduction. These are things that I think, and I forget who made the point a little earlier, but they're going to be so important for OER to be able to measure, if that's an important role. Is it working? How do we know? So you've got the in addition to program outcomes, these other pieces that are really important to measure. And then the third section of the framework is really about the programs being an engine for a bunch of the work that OER is doing on the strategic goals. So I just listed the ones that are featured in the framework currently. As you all know, each of these has many sub-programs. And so it was a challenge, and Olu gave some good feedback on kind of what's the right level of detail for the program areas, because I think right now there's minimal detail. We're just trying to frame what each of these program areas are. I think, we can definitely consider putting more detail in there, because certainly we could have a 30-page document for each of the program areas. The program managers have given me a ton of info. But I think we're trying to just hit the sweet spot so it captures it, and then there's going to be a lot of space, I think, for the program areas being lifted up more. But all of them being aligned to the goals and linked to the outcomes. And then again, knowing that not all of OER's work fits into these program areas, how do we make sure that that's clear? And it's so before I sort of give you some of these framing questions, I apologize for the brain dump there. Just wonder, any quick reactions or thoughts on, and I'll just throw out some questions and we'll see where people are at with their thinking.
Is this a document that's, it sounded like from our conversation earlier, this is a document that's going to be used to better communicate the role of the office to the city council. So maybe if that's going to be the case, that the level of detail and other things we should be considering how that is communicating at an appropriate level for the city council. Does that make sense? So if they're comparing this office to the fire department, they're thinking, what does the fire department do with having that clear level of understanding? Is that the same clear level of understanding as in this document in terms of details?
So just real quick and then pass it to George. I mean, of course, I agree, yes. And I think that, even a comment Tony made to me earlier made me think it's going to be really important to have a good, clear executive summary version of this, because it's too long. So in a lot of ways, it has too much detail. In other ways, it has nowhere near enough detail. You know what I mean? And I think that's why I think in hindsight, I don't know that it made a total sense to me at the beginning, but now in hindsight, it makes so much sense that part of the scope of work that I was given was the communication piece. Because I think that it may be, even with a bang up executive summary, that it's sort of too much all at once. And so figuring out like what are some of the key pieces that need to be broken out and used in, it's almost like, I think it would be good to have kind of a toolkit for you all. And it's like, depending on the situation, you can pull out the top points or whatever. So I think the bottom line, of course, is yes.
Yeah, in light of the tensions that's happening right now with the budget conversations. And I love how you flowed how it all connects. One thing that your question made me think about in communication with OER and its utility and usefulness for the city is like tweaking the communication and language to include ROI, because it's a very different tool than a response to a fire department, because it's the immediate band-aid, but this is like an investment in the community in the $2 million. And what are you going to show for it? And so from an economic development perspective, I'm curious if a tweet including ROI with outcomes and outputs would be helpful for council to swallow that pill.
Could I add to that? But I also think that clear understanding of the need that's trying to be addressed and the return against that need. Would help to- Like for fire department, the need is we do not have fires, so it's really clear, like what is that for economic revitalization?
I would maybe be a little careful how much we throw, because we could do all this in or outside the plan. But actually, the reason we're doing this now is the auditor said, we audited you, we don't know what you do. It's unclear. So I don't have anything to audit you against. This kind of to me would check that box of the next time they come, they could say, you're supposed to do all these things, you have $2.5 million, where did you spend the money? You spent it helping farmers in Wailua, you spent it on this, you spent it on this. Looks like you met your mission. And it's hard to get council to keep funding you if you keep having audit citations, right? But if we check that box and we could do I love ROI, but we could do it outside of this document.
And I think there's a way to, I think, yeah, it's sort of a yes, because there's a way to frame it for sure. I was thinking when Amy was talking about kind of how OER leverage, like the city leverages OER to bring in resources that don't show up in OER's budget necessarily, but are going directly to individuals and businesses. We can make that point much stronger and clearer in here to tee up, showing ROI for different pieces. The other thing I just wanted to mention, that Greg wanted me to mention. He literally emailed me. It's like, why are you emailing me and asking me to mention? Is
How many
that-
emails did Greg send you?
A few, yeah. Is that, we shouldn't think of this as just a response to the law. And I think I talked a lot about it. Responding to the auditor in the last meeting, but I think, one of the things that I really got the sense of from talking to the program managers is this is really needed anyway. I mean, this is maybe a nice confluence of what the auditor thought was needed and what's actually needed. Just like there were a bunch of comments program managers made, but I remember one from Alex. She talked about like she has all these thought bubbles about stuff that related to her programs that she wants to pursue and might pursue, and if there's an opportunity to pursue it. But that already the framework has begun to give her like a place to put those bubbles, thinking about how do they relate to these goals and objectives and so on. And I think, that hopefully will begin to pay dividends, internally and externally. If it's just clear how all this fits together and why, like why is this revitalization?
What I'd like to see is, as we flush all these things, because there's so much to cover. But if we are gonna have like 20 minutes with a council member, like perhaps we come up with a template or a format of communication that simplifies it so we can kind of cut to the chase and basically address their needs, which is, what have we done? And then how has this affected the community? Because it might not, the businesses, but it's more like if the community becomes more aware and more participatory in the support of the businesses, because you need the customers and you need all that, or what did it do to Wahiwa by having all of these things? But perhaps if, as we flesh things out, that we get not necessarily a script, but a guideline that we make sure that we cover it when we do have a conversation with the council, so that they're hearing the same message from all of us, in that way. And it's just communication, right? That seems to be the issue.
I'm not sure council members want to know what we've done. They feel like they know that in some sense, even if they don't. Where are we going? For what purpose? That's what they want us.
But that could be part of our template of things to cover. I mean, that's my point, right? It's more like making sure that we're telling them what they wanted, that what they're interested in.
We've articulated over and over what we've done. I think we've beat that horse.
Right.
Fine. Where are you going? What's the purpose? Make this make sense for us.
Yeah, I think to Deb's point, though, like when I walk into a meeting with a legislator, I always have the fact sheet of what has my company done in that district that benefits that community? What is our history in Hawaii? And then you know, what am I asking for, right? And so I think to her point, you're kind of, yeah, I agree with you. It would be helpful if we had. you
I
know,
kind of agree,
Yeah.
but every time we do our budget briefings, the last 3 or 4 years, we put together a two-sided thing. One side is the budget and what we're gonna be able to do with it, and the backside is everything we've done in your district in every different program. And they like, you know. Yeah, whatever their thing is for the day. So
But maybe.
I'm not disregarding it. I'm just saying like, we have been taking that approach
I know.
and it doesn't seem to let.
I know, I think that maybe this is where the commission should help too with that.
But maybe we shorten it to like literally 2 things. You know, what I mean, it sounds like if their attention span is limited because they're doing 10,000 things and they don't want to see all these words and paper, whatever. You know, how can we condense it so that it's more effective? They kind of get the idea that we are doing something and we kind of achieve that without boring them with facts, because we're defending ourselves. You know, why should we defend it? We're producing. So I don't know, that's just literally off the top of my head, so however that pans out. I think that,
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of where my brain was going listening to that was the way we're trying to set up this performance measurement framework is really to show if it's possible to show and measure impact of it. So less, I mean, it may be that OER gets to a point where you don't have to talk as much about like, here are the programs we delivered and focus on here's the impact that it made on the community. But you know, I think ideally we'll be able to have information at every level. This is what we did. These are the outcomes that we were trying to create, and here's what actually happened. That we can show through the indicators, and I think to be able to craft a package or talking points for a particular conversation, you know, where it's all available through this framework, I think will be really good. I think there's another kind of open question, and that's very good. Oh, Tony, bye, Tony. Hi, thanks. You'll see in the framework, in terms of reporting and reporting cadence, I wanted to be really careful to not, even in the draft, kind of box you guys too much in terms of like, this is the specific schedule the reporting is gonna happen on. It's more, you know, that via reports to the commission and in ongoing communication with all the important stakeholders, that there will be opportunities, you know, by having this framework in place to have the information that you need to articulate what and why, what impact.
who did support, like, I mean, I'm just thinking of the, you know, like, the council members is, you know, always ask them with a question, you know, how do you, this is what you've done, where else would you want to see, like, give them, maybe they need some agency, like, some input, like, we're not asking them the input, so we're like giving all the things we're doing, but is it something, and I don't know, this is politics, I don't know, is that something that the council members would appreciate more? It's like, you know, here's our lane, then how do you feel? Like, are we, you know, in your area, like, how does this support, how does this, yeah, it might be some of that, I don't know. You know,
I've been asking a lot of our program managers in this process. If your program or this office went away, would anyone care? Would it matter? I mean, that's the essential nature. Like, what would be lost for the community? Like, what is the essential piece of this? Right? Like, why does it matter? And so I think it maybe some of that as well. Like, what do they care about? And that, what would be the problem? It would disappear. So what? I think there's a lot, and I think it's to articulate that at the program level and at the office level, why the essential nature, to Amy's point of like, not only what's happened in the past, but like, why is this critical for the future of this place? The work that's
You know, OER was created during COVID as a response to that disruption. And, we're continuing to see disruptions like the recent storms, and we can expect this frequency to continue, if not accelerate. It's our new normal. Um, and in these disruptions, whether it's COVID or these storms, we're seeing community response being really strong, but the coordination with these other systems, particularly with government, has a lot of work to do, right? And then, tying this back to how we're thinking about ourselves as in this draft strategic framework, there are a lot of other state and nonprofits that are doing more traditional economic development programs. I mean, me and Melly are great examples of that. Um, and I think we all want to avoid duplication, including the council. And um, but the strategic framework is, I think, where I want to make sure we're all on the same page, because it's a kind of a real shift in and clear articulation of who OER is in the strategic framework around this coordinator or integrator role. Like, are we as a commission kind of all aligned around that or not? And do we need to have more conversation around that? Because I think if we are, then we know what our charge, we can continue to refine this document. But if we're not, like, we got to have that conversation. I am personally bought into that role.
I guess I have a question on that is, if that's the role, does that mean the direct programming that OER is currently doing is going to stop? Is it going to be passed
No.
on to a partner?
No, I think we articulated in a way where these programs are addressing critical gaps in this role, or advancing things or demonstrating things in it. So it advances it. It's not we're not supplanting one for the other. But I think that clearer articulation would be helpful.
I think a perfect example of that is the Oahu Business Connector. This is where people say, oh, you did Idea to Biz, or it's an accelerator. You guys are duplicating what Melly does. And we're like, I think you need to understand that we're here to, a stated point of our work is to not duplicate and to be able to provide people access to those who are doing the programs out there. Idea to Biz, through the Oahu Business Connector work, through the daily outreach that our resource connectors do, identified there are communities that don't know any resources exist to help them start a business, to become an entrepreneur. I could get help for free. And in the pandemic, it was more than obvious that no one was doing this. And all of our partners, whether it was Keone or Melly or anyone else, said, if someone could just put the resources in one place, and our feeling was, we don't want to do that. Have someone, and they're like, you guys do it because you're government. You're kind of neutral. I mean, I don't know if people think government is neutral today. But if we create a program, it's an identified gap, and we bring those partners that we're connected with in the community in to do the work. We pay them, we get the money, and it passes through us. And because we're already paid by the city, we're not taking a cut of that federal dollar, that private dollar, the dollar from the bank who does SBA business, or anybody else. And so to me, like, that's the part that people don't understand, which we could articulate through this integrator role, where people instead say, oh, the SBA already does that. Why do you guys even exist? And we're not doing anything the SBA does. I think definitely other people are out there trying to connect to resources, but on the daily basis, we're in touch with them. We're sharing the same programs they are, and we're making sure that not only Waianae Economic Development Council is promoting their work, but we're promoting their work, and we're directing people to them if that's their community and they need someone to support them in Waianae or in Peace or anyone else. So that's, to me, a part of the genesis of OER and a part of how we carry forth our work. When we get funds, it's to build capacity among businesses, among community-based partners, among farmers, to support those strategic goals.
And I'm just in listening to this, I mean, I'm having ideas of how we can clarify and strengthen the point about the way OER, the mode OER always works in. I mean, it's already, you know, the way the approach is articulated now in every bullet includes partnership, leveraging, coordination, integration, but I mean, I think if it's just really clear, like everything we do is playing that role, and also the not duplication point, like it's gotta be super clear, like if that's a headline about OER in everything, basically. And I think that seems like a big piece that needs to be addressed over and over. I'm curious just if there are any other thoughts on Keone's point about everybody being on the same page about that role, because I agree with that. If there is any doubt, not that we need to put that doubt on the table right now, but if there is any doubt, that has a big impact on how we're creating this framework. Like, just if there are other thoughts about, is that the central, is that the core of OER and its approach? Or are there other pieces that really are as important? I don't know.
I just have a question about it, going back to, and I'm sorry to keep bringing this up, but it seems like an important thing, but just in terms of maybe what you said about the city council, thinking about direction forward. The city seems to be very much in the business of like on the ground direct community services in so many ways. So is this role, which is kind of different from the other types of key services that the city provides, going to be that issue with the council? The coordinator.
Yeah, that's my question.
Great, like all their other city services are so, do the streets, make sure that people are safe. And this is just very, I mean, it's very important, obviously, and I'm not disagreeing with how important it is, I'm just saying, but compared to others.
I'm not sure the city
Yeah.
council fully understands
Yeah.
that, but I think our fellow city agencies really understand that and really rely on us when they want to connect with community. Whether it's the police department, when they have an issue in a community, they come to us. When it's DEM to talk to limited English or to talk to businesses, they come to us. And so that to me is the big, like, you can't be an integrator if you don't have strong relationships. And I feel like in my life and my work, this is a hard thing to measure, the value of relationship, the value of connection. But it's key to how we all operate here, and often government operates in a silo up here. And I think this economic development work is trying to change that paradigm a little, you know?
I think it might be part of the challenge. I don't know, I think my thoughts are for 4 minutes yet, but I think that's also part of what we need help communicating. I wrote down, I think our role, I'm not sure it's in the waiver, but often this office, I think now and moving forward, listens to community for those goals and partners with community and thinks about how to fill essential gaps. So I don't know, it's one of the things that the other state agencies, federal agencies are not doing, and I'm not helping with community, but I think the messaging piece for Josh to help us think about old school cities, counties, municipalities, it was about those direct tangible services, right? Fill a pothole, have the police officer, and the way everything we're seeing nationally as well of like the future of cities is that cities need to become more nimble. Futures need to be future focused, planning, not just looking at what's immediate in front of us. And cities, I think, we need to pivot a bit in that to think ahead towards the city of future resilience, right? But that's a challenge, I think. We were not historically great at that, right? There's a literal fire or figurative fire and we put it out. There's a pothole and we fill it. That's not just true here, it's how cities kind of have operated, but they're shifting. I think you're seeing that across the nation, that those who are doing well are thinking about where does the city need to be.
So instead of just reacting.
Right, becoming more proactive, more planning, more future minded, and but it's not how we just, any city has historically been right now.
Are there other aid departments, like maybe an Office of Climate Change, that kind of serve in a similar coordinating kind of role, that they maybe have some framework that you could adapt?
No.
I think there's buy-in already for, you know, with it, so the departments function.
Not sure there's buy-in, and I think there's sometimes similar, like,
Similar concern.
you know, of like, what do they do?
But there are other offices of economic development and other councils that are
Yeah.
very well funded,
Yeah, correct.
with more staff.
All of the neighbor island offices of economic development are funded higher than us. Maui County office.
And what's interesting
Well,
about that.
Yeah, right? It's interesting.
Which is so interesting because also they have very strong economic development boards on those islands and we don't here, arguably, not yet anyway. And so
But just to be clear, what Eliza is talking about is like Hawaii Economic Development Board, Hawaii Islands Economic Opportunity, whatever their acronym is. Maui County Economic Development Board is amazing. But in the words of Kat, who runs OEDB, she's like, we're still trying to navigate a new way forward.
so arguably OER is more important here. We don't have, you know,
We do need more private partners.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that to Josh, just something like a bigger community development corporation or something where we could run dollars through even to do this stuff more efficiently. But so I think a part of that work in the long-term big picture is to have somehow help to make that develop, maybe with Hawaii Green Growth or something, I don't know.
It's more of a, I guess, a short-term question, but if the feds come down with some emergency aid for the flood and it goes to the city at least partially, where does it go? Is it OER would be the logical choice for that? Like, is there an urgency or?
I don't think the feds, the way that the money comes in a disaster works that way. It is reimbursement for what we've already spent in terms of like that 50 or 100 million that the managing director was talking about today. It's, you know, the debris cleanup, it's the direct relief, it's the cleaning of the streams. So they'll reimburse us afterwards for that. The federal programs will operate as they are, the SBA. So we'll connect people to the SBA program, right? If there's CDBG funds to help with rehousing people, you know, DCS, we would probably support with language services to connect people back, but there's not gonna be like during COVID, a pot of fund to run programs. If that happens, like with the business recovery, it's potentially from the money from the state. If we're able to put something together to support farmers, it would come from our rainy day fund.
The need though is that, I don't know, is it the connector piece again? Because if there's money available for families, farmers and businesses, I think our job is to make sure that every possible dollar gets tapped, right? And no one's missing out who's eligible, because a lot of folks for a variety of reasons might be challenged to know the RL, you know, just fill out the forms and everything. So how do we, to me, that's our.
But what you're
is that
talking
word?
about, Olin, is why Maui County has the $12 million. Development Office.
Right.
They do regular small business. Hawaii has one that's an innovation fund. Hawaii Island does different stuff, both with federal and.
Like, I couldn't sign my kids up for swimming because the city website crashed, but then folks can sign up for OERs readily because it didn't crash, you know, so. You know, there's some.
There you go. Yeah, yeah.
but I think that.
Oh, friends.
Yeah.
Because only that there's other programs that we can model after.
Right.
Or at least look at for reference.
Something I'm wondering about that we'll have further conversation about and try drafting some stuff, but there's nothing in the framework right now that it talks about the role of OER, but it doesn't describe like the structure at all, and when we being in the managing director's office, what the rationale is for that, and what the history of any economic development office in Honolulu is, how it compares to other counties, like having some context for that might be helpful.
Yeah. Just another piece, since you brought up economic development boards, in the next few months, Deb is working on bringing the Oahu Workforce Development Board under the management of OER. So this is an attempt by the city to align our economic development strategies with our workforce development strategies. This agency, these four people receive and pass on all the Department of Labor funds for workforce development at the county level. Some go to another city agency and some go to other private partners. But in managing that, it'll give us greater purview in an area that I think we all know is super important for the future of this island, which is making sure that there's living wage jobs for the people who are committed to live and have their kids here and raise their kids, and this is their home. So that's a big development for OER and a good opportunity for us, as well as directing some of the funds under their more well aligned with our work and our connection with the Workforce Development Council of the state, the university, etc.
You can share more. I didn't know.
So we're almost at time. So if there are any last thoughts, we can get to those. I just wanted to kind of tee up that these questions that are on the last page of the flipchart PDF that I sent all of you. Does the structure make sense? Is there anything missing or unclear? Does this reflect how OER should operate and does operate? Are we measuring the right things? These are all like, you can think of those questions as you read through, and again, please, even if you don't have time to draft language for something that you think needs to be added, just flag it even, and then that way we can continue to work on it. Because we have time before the main meeting, and worst case, doesn't have to be approved at the main meeting, but I think we have time where we can get a near final document together for you guys before that meeting. And so we'll follow up. I'll probably follow up with each of you individually with some suggested deadlines and what a reminder of what would be great if you could do in terms of giving feedback. Any last thoughts before I pass it back to the chair to wrap up?
Sorry, I have really loud yard people going on. But yeah, thank you, Josh. And I'm sorry, Karen, if I'm blasting your ear, there's nothing I can do. But yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to conversation. I have some thoughts, but didn't want to chime in out so loud. I guess.
Thanks, Melody.
Okay, making a motion to adjourn. 1 second. All in favor?
Oh.